everyone. I'm John Sterling, and boy, do we have things to talk about.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
You bet we got stuff to talk about. How are you, everybody? My name is Tim Hanlon, and you have stumbled across, again, Good Seats Still Available, our curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. And that voice that you heard is early days of somebody who's now obviously quite legendary in New York sports broadcasting circles. His name is John Sterling, and you know him for his dulcet tones calling for many years, I think since 1989, if that's not mistaken, New York Yankees broadcasts. And that little clip that you heard, though, was from some of the days prior to what we now know the future Hall of Fame broadcaster and his Yankee days. Still going strong, by the way, as the season gets ready to get underway. And we wish him and the Yankees well, of course. But before all that Yankee greatness started, John Sterling was a well-known fixture in New York City sports and talk radio. And that little clip that you heard at the beginning here was from October 19th, 1977 on WMCA radio, AM 570, on your AM dial. And John hosted probably, I think, maybe one of the true first sports talk call-in shows, not only in New York, but I think in the nation. And that was actually the night after the historic New York Yankees World Series victory. That was the night after that big game when Reggie Jackson had 3 home runs, and an amazing time in New York City sports history, New York City general history, right? A tough year, 1977, with the blackouts and Son of Sam and all that kind of stuff, but the South Bronx basically ablaze. But boy, oh boy, what memories that brings back. But we're going to talk to John not only about some of those WMCA days, but also some of the early sports exploits that we're interested in this particular little show. Bet you didn't know that John was the first voice and, frankly, the guy who brought the team to the air of the old WHA, World Hockey Association, New York Golden Blades. Yeah, those games were on WMCA radio, and that was John Sterling's doing. We get into some of that. We talk about some of his days being the play-by-play announcer for both the New York Islanders of the National Hockey League. A very interesting story there, because without the WHA forming, I don't think the Islanders even would have been formed themselves. So an interesting little circle of history there. But of course, the ABA New York Nets, John Sterling was the announcer for many of those games with his color analyst, Mike DiTomaso. There's a name from the past. Also into their transition into the NBA as the New Jersey Nets, the gutty gritty New Jersey Nets. And we get into them with memories of folks like VBK, Jan Van Predikoff, and Bernard Sky, BB King, and remember all those great games. And we also, lest we forget too, John was also the voice of the, wait for it, World Football League New York Stars. Played at the old Downing Stadium in Randall's Island to crowds of hundreds, if that. And we get into some of that with John. A little bit of the transition into the Charlotte relocation of that franchise in the middle of the season. Something we talked about with our previous guest, Upton Bell, who bought that franchise and moved him to Charlotte. Of course, we want to thank Upton for actually connecting us to John and getting us him for this broadcast. A tip of the old cap to Upton, as always. And we get into all that stuff with John Sterling, a couple of years in Atlanta, as well as the other sort of things that happened along the way to his, of course, now legendary and still going strong career as the New York Yankees play-by-play broadcaster. And we get into all of that great stuff with the wonderful and quite shy, but we encourage him to come out of his shell, John Sterling, coming up in a minute or two. We want to say thank you, of course, though, to one of our great sponsors, and we keep adding them by the month, it seems. And our friends at 503 Sports is the one we want to highlight this week. 503 Sports, they fancy themselves as the king of throwbacks, and you'll find them at 503-sports.com. And you want to make sure you use the promo code SEATS for 10% off all of your purchases when you go to 503-sports.com. And what are you going to find there? You're going to find great logoed T-shirts and hoodies and caps, and even some throwback handcrafted meticulously so jerseys of various teams no longer with us or previously incarnated. In particular, a whole bunch of stuff in the realm of old professional football leagues, including, by the way, the World Football League. I'm not sure the New York Stars are represented, but you'll see some stuff from the Memphis Southmen there. And there might be an old Stars T-shirt in the mix, but not a jersey. But yeah, rest assured that they're absolutely on the list for future creation. And again, you want to check them out. It's at 503 Sports. That's 503-sports.com. Make sure you use the promo code SEATS, and you're going to get 10% off all of your purchases. That'd be shirts and hoodies and all those kinds of fun things with great logos and memories of teams no longer with us. And we appreciate our pal Dustin Alameda out in beautiful Portland, Oregon, for throwing some promotional love our way. And we hope you enjoy some of the fine wares from our friends at 503 Sports. Again, 503-sports.com, promo code SEATS, and please enjoy that discount courtesy of us. And we appreciate your checking them out. We also appreciate you checking out this just fun and amazing conversation with the one, the only, the inimitable New York Yankees broadcaster extraordinaire, future Hall of Famer, if you ask me, and many others. Here's John Sterling. I think everybody on the planet knows you, obviously, as the longtime voice of the New York Yankees. But I'm not sure most of America or baseball fans out there know you from your earlier days, cutting your teeth, shall we say, with some forgotten teams, but ones that we like to kind of delve into. And I'm wondering, maybe before we sort of get into some of those first stops, maybe you could regale our audience with a little bit of how you even got into broadcasting in the first place.
Well, I'm very, very fortunate. And believe me, I have 4 kids, and I worry about them. What are they going to do after college? They're all about ready to matriculate in college. When I was, I know it's tough to believe this. I swear to God it's true. When I was like 9 or 10 or 11, I knew I was going to be a broadcaster. I knew I was going on the air. So I never had to worry about what I was going to do. And I sloughed my way through high school and a little bit of college. And when I finally, I had a great boost. I was going to Columbia General Studies, and they had a class at NBC given by the WNBC program director. Now, I had this inside of me. Broadcasting is intrinsic for me. And so when I went to this class, it was given at the studios at WNBC, given by the WNBC program director, a 2.5-hour class one night a week. And I'm going to try to say this nicely because it sounds terrible, but, you know, I was Michael Jordan in that class. I mean, this is what I was going to do for a living, and I had been doing it in my head all these years, listening to every disc jockey and every newscaster and every sportscaster. And the guy gave me an A+, and the only A I ever got in school. And and my kids get great report cards, and I did not. And he said, "You're good enough to go out." How do you go out? Well, you make up a tape, or what do you put on the tape? And I finally got a job in a small station, upstate New York, and I've been on the air ever since, thank God.
How did you get, though, into sports in particular, right? So the radio thing, the disc jockey thing, you know, getting on the air, but what kind of got you into sports? And I guess your first real sports gig was with the old Baltimore Bullets, right, back in 1970, 71, right?
Well, what happened is I landed a big-time talk show at Metro Media in Baltimore, and then it sprung out a couple of years later into an hour talk on WJZ-TV, and I did the same show that Oprah did later on. She did a little more with it, I might add. And but anyway, I was doing a 3-hour radio show and a 1-hour TV show, and I kept putting sports on it because that's what I love. And so I got to be very close buddies, Uncle John to his kids, with Jim Carvelis, who was a great broadcaster, doing the Bullets. And then, finally I started to get a sports rep. And Jim and I did Colt games before the end of the season because they didn't want to take the baseball guys off baseball. It wouldn't look good for having them do football. And then I started filling in when Jim would go away on basketball. And it led to an enormous job for me at WMCA doing the 3-hour sports talk show. I was doing Morgan State football, and then I did the Knicks on their radio network. I was very busy. Boy, did I work. And then a year or two later, MCA got the Nets and Islanders, and I did the Nets and Islanders, and on and on and on. Well, I'm talking so much, I forgot your question. What was your question?
Well, no, I was really kind of curious as to sort of how the sports thing kind of got going, right? And obviously,
well, I made the talk show in Baltimore a portion of sports. They didn't like me doing it, but that's what I wanted to do, and so that led to a sports rep, and that led to MCA, and from there on in, it's been all sports.
So, okay, so how do you slide into then doing play-by-play stuff, right? Because clearly the skill set of hosting a talk show, either generally or even around sports, right, is very different than accurately calling the action, say, for the Bullets in Baltimore in the early 70s, or some of your first taste in New York when you were working with some of these franchises that we'll touch upon before even the Nets and the Islanders.
Right.
How do you get that play-by-play thing going?
Well, one thing, it's different rhythm, yes, but it's still communicating in the English language. And, frankly, I had that ability. It was inside of me. I've been doing it all my life, just wasn't on the air. and so I'll tell you a cute story, and then this will kind of lead into it. My first alone play-by-play job, I'll never forget it, the biggest thrill of my life, was a Sunday afternoon game with the Bullets and the Celtics up in Boston. And Carvelis was doing a golf tournament. So he got off the game, and I got the game. And it was, I'm just telling you this nicely, so I don't have to act like humble Howard. It was easy. I mean, it came to me easily. I mean, I've been doing it all my life. I've been listening. I could do it. Anyway, Jim gets home after his golf tournament, wherever that was, and he went to his wife, Lori. Now, remember, I'm Uncle John to their kids. I mean, we're really close. And so Carvelis says to Lori, well, how did John do? And she said, well, I thought he did great. Well, what did he sound like? And she said, well, he kind of sounded like you. And he said, well, that's not so bad. And so I was away, and I never thought of it after that. I mean, I did it. I'll never forget that day, waking up in the hotel in Boston, getting myself together, listening to music, which I always do, and going to the Boston Garden and doing the game. And that was for me. And thank God it's been that way for I'm going to try to do this in my mind quickly. It's been that way for, almost 50 years.
Well, it's a gift, right? To know really what you want to do and to be able to focus and orient yourself and have the confidence, frankly, to step up and do it. And I think that's arguably one of the reasons why you've been such an indelible voice with things like baseball, certainly in the Yankees for so many years. It's just very curious to sort of hear the various stories of how people either luck into or find their way into or determine their way through into the booth.
Yeah, it's a very tough competitive business, and it is not arithmetic, 1 + 1 + 1. You jump all over the place, and I have been unbelievably fortunate. Starting then, I got Morgan State before I left Baltimore. That's a predominantly black school in Baltimore. And so I carried that with me to New York, and all of a sudden, I'm doing this talk show. I'm doing the New York Raiders of the WHA. More on that later, of course.
Yes.
I'm doing the Knicks on their radio network, taking vacation days to leave my show to do that, and then the Nets and Islanders and the talk show, and then the Nets as a simulcast, and 1 year with Enterprise Radio doing their lead talk show, and the Washington Bullets on TV, and 1 year later, Enterprise went down in financial flames, and and I went to Atlanta. All luck. Just the same guy hired all my friends, and so I went down to Atlanta, did a talk show for a year, and the Hawks, and then the Hawks and Braves, and then the Yankees, and my goodness, and this is my 31st year with the Yanks. Now I know you want to talk about teams that flamed out. In the middle in the 70s, I did the WFL. I did the WHA. I did games in the ABA that were stopped right away from a contract dispute. So I kind of paid my dues scratching around till I got all these good jobs.
Well, and I don't know any broadcaster, frankly, worth his or her salt that doesn't or hasn't, right? And I would argue even in that generation, right? It's still today, right? It's a not only is it a peripatetic calling, but it's also one where multiple jobs is and continues to be kind of the rule, right? To not only make ends meet, but to keep your name and your voice and your chops up to speed for all the various opportunities that come and sometimes, frankly, go.
Yeah, it's a very odd, different, unique business, without question.
All right. Well, let's unpack a few things. So when you went to WMCA in New York, right? Was sports broadcasting beyond the talk show component of MCA? Was that already a known factor for you, or was that just hey, I'm now in New York and I'm going to expand my wings beyond the Morgan State gig every fall?
Well, MCA was the most laissez-faire station I've ever worked at. That won't happen again. And I went to my program director, a guy named Ken Fairchild, and I said, there's a new hockey team in town, and I'd love to get him on the air. What do you think? And he said, well, why don't you go down there and make a deal? Now, can you imagine that? Can you imagine that happening today? I mean, how ridiculous. And so I went down there to their offices across the street from the Garden in this grungy hotel, and I made a deal, and we made a 50-50 deal, splitting up costs and the monies from advertisers. And that allowed me to do hockey. I wanted to do hockey. And it was that simple. I mean, it could never happen again today. And
this was the Raiders franchise of the World Hockey Association, correct?
Yes. And they gave the franchise to people who didn't have the money, which was dumb. And I don't think it was 2 weeks into the season. We were in Quebec. And we got on the bus after the game. And the PR director, a guy named Herb Elk, got on the bus, and before we left, he had a speech. And the speech was, we've run out of money, and the league has taken over the team. Everyone will get paid, which is all anyone cared about. So then in the second year, people bought the team and took it away from New York and brought it down to Cherry Hill, and that was the end of my WHA hockey. But if you said to me, did you love doing it? Oh, my God, did I love doing it. It was so much fun. And, I'm building a sports rep. Now I'm doing football, hockey, and the talk show in New York. I mean, that's a 3-hour talk show every night of the week. And it went from there to then the Nets and Islanders. And, excuse me, I was not just doing football and hockey. I was doing the Knicks on their radio network. Frank Messer was doing the games, and he'd leave early to go down to Florida. And I picked up for him. So, you couldn't do a lot more work than I did. And so that was the WHA. You want me to tell you about the WFL?
Yeah, sure. Before we get there, though, it's ironic, right? Because having your taste with the Raiders, and I guess they were renamed the Golden Blades that next year, and it kind of had to be odd, though, playing calling games in Madison Square Garden on maybe off days or we say less than desirable days that the Rangers and or the Knicks weren't using.
Right. We did a lot of Sunday afternoons and all. I'll tell you why I love the WHA. You could be down by 5 goals and come back and win. Usually when leagues begin, they can't quite get the defense. Offense you can get. And so the games were so much fun to do, my God.
Yeah, it's also ironic, too, because you wound up becoming the voice for much of the 1970s for the team, arguably, that came into being because of the WHA's arrival, the New York Islanders. Right? I think it was I want to say relatively hastily created franchise, but obviously it was hastened or quickened into being because of the WHA's arrival and their desire to put a team in the New York metro area. Did that Blades experience have any direct relationship to you getting the Islanders gig, or was that just because you had a whole lot of heat doing so many different things in the city?
No, what happened is the games went to MCA. They took the games, the Nets and Islanders, as a package. And so I started doing them because I was, quote unquote, the sports director of WMCA. Sports director of WMCA meant I ordered myself around. And so I did the Nets and Islanders until they split, and I had to choose one of the other. I chose the Nets. My best buddy was coaching the team, Kevin Lockery, so it was a very easy choice to make. And like that. In the middle of all this did come the WFL.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I'm uncertain as to whether you called games for the New York Stars out on Downing Stadium there on Randall's Island, or the Charlotte Hornets, or both. Neither. I don't even know.
Yeah. Well, the first year I did the games on WMCA. The reason I'm mentioning this is because it's such a wacky story. I did the games with an Jet running back, a great Jet running back, Matt Snell. And we did the games at Downing Stadium. At Downing Stadium, the lights were terrible. They were players obviously jammed the teams. You didn't know they were. And someone at MCA had forgotten to put in a line. So the first game we did, the opening game at Downing Stadium, the New York Stars against somebody. Well, I did it on the telephone. And I passed the phone back and forth to Matt, and he was fine. And we did this game. We made up a game.
All right, Stars, first and goal, the one. They've been working on this all week. They had some problems inside the 5 at Jacksonville. Here is the fake by Sherman bootleg. Touchdown, Stars! Beautiful bootleg by Tommy Sherman. The fake to Richards going right. Sherman bootlegged it left. And looking like, who was the famous bootlegger in football? Frankie Albert. And a touchdown for the Stars at 7-3. Well, I think they were all looking for them to run off tackle. Gladgio made a good run back up at the start of that drive, and I think he got that defense to lean in, and they faked that off tackle play to him, and as you said, Sherman rolled out. He was all by himself, not even the linebacker stayed home. All right, here comes the action point. That was a 60-yard Star drive in 6 plays. They lead 7-3. The action point from the 2.5. Sherman to give to Gladgio. Dodging, got the action point. And the Stars lead it 8-3. Gladgio cutting left, saw an opening and slid through, got the action point. So there's a timeout on the field. Where's the score? The Stars 8, Birmingham 3. More Stars football in just 60 seconds.
I didn't have much faith in the World Football League continuing. Was that am I have the right thing? Yeah, the World League, yeah. And now the next year, so the Stars vanished. They still owe me money.
No, wait, hold on.
You want to hear it?
Yeah,
I'll give you.
That's what I want to hear, of course.
One game, they weren't doing on radio. They were going to do on TV, and I did the game with a buddy of mine, Sal Marciano. It was out in Portland. And this is a great story. I'd forgotten about it. You just triggered my mind, my weak little mind. We fly out to Portland, and we do the game. And the game was going to go on Channel 9 after the Mets game. The Mets were playing the Cardinals at Shea Stadium. And so when Sal and I left the building after the game, and we're going to go out, and the producer, I guess, I can't think of the name of the guy, but the producer said, the Met game is an extra innings. Our game hasn't gone on yet. And we laughed about it. We thought he was kidding, first of all, but we laughed about it. We went out. Now, the next day, we're flying back to New York. And we find out that last night, the Mets game went 25 innings against the Cards. The game never went on the air. And they were going to show it the next night. So we flew back. It was the weirdest situation. We had broadcast a game that wouldn't go on the air for another day. but that's what crazy stories from the WHA. And then, if I remember correctly, the team just quit. They just stopped the Stars from playing, or maybe they moved somewhere. This is near the end of the year. Is that crazy?
Yeah, well, I think it actually moved sort of near the end of the season. It actually kind of, because I know there was, like, for example, the I think the actual home game that followed that Portland experience, I think, only played in front of like 4,200 fans on a Tuesday night in September. So, Oh, yeah. Many people didn't see that game either.
So the next year, it's tough for me to put this together. The next year, Upton had a team in Charlotte, and he wanted me to do the games, and of course I wanted to do them, so I'd have to fly out to do the games. And then we did a game in Southern California at the Anaheim Stadium, the Angel Stadium, and we weren't going to go on. They were going to go on to Hawaii. It's so funny. And the league ended. Bang, boom, goodbye, and that ended that league. So, and I didn't tell you this, in the late 60s or 70, I agreed to do play-by-play for the Washington team in the ABA. And I was doing the game. Rick Barry was injured, so he did the color. We've been friends ever since. We've been friends a long time. Tennis partners, et cetera, et cetera. And but they didn't make a deal. The team didn't make a deal with this TV station because they were going to move to Virginia, which they did.
This is the Washington Caps,
and so,
right?
Yeah. And so I did a couple of games, loved it. Oh, I loved it. And it was taken away from me. That's it. No TV contract, no more games. So, the thing you can take out of this is, as I say, it's not arithmetic. You go from here to there, up, down, in, out, and you hope you finally land somewhere. And I have, because in the 70s I was in New York, in the 80s I was in Atlanta, and this is going to be my 31st year with the Yanks. So if you said to me, John, do you think you're very fortunate? Boy, do I think I'm fortunate. I mean, I've had nothing but great jobs for like 55 years. So I'm very, very fortunate.
All right, time for me to catch my breath, get a cool, tasty beverage, and remind you, while we do so, that our friends at Audible are here to remind you that you can get a free audiobook download of your choice from over 180,000 titles. If you go to audibletrial.com/goodseats and use that link, of course, to try for yourself a free audiobook on us, gratis, if you will. And you will love the idea of audiobooks. It's an awesome way to kill time and occupy and stimulate your mind, perhaps when your eyes are busy doing something else. And of course, there are plenty of interesting books to be found, especially in the world of sports and sports history. And I think our audience might enjoy a few of these, of course, including the seminal work by baseball legend Jim Bouton. It's called Ball 4. It is not only written, but it's also narrated by him. You could use your free credit for that book. And of course, as you know, Ball 4 centers around the 1969 one-year wonder that is the Seattle Pilots of Major League Baseball, but obviously the background for a whole lot of other observations about the sport of baseball. And it remains to this day perhaps one of the most celebrated writings about the sport of baseball in this country. Of course, you can also, if you're not a big baseball fan, you can go into the world of soccer with the autobiography called My Turn by Johan Cruyff, the late Johan Cruyff, perhaps one of the world's best ever soccer players. He of Dutch heritage, of course. Plenty of great legendary years at club play as well as national team play for the Dutch team, as well as, for our audience, maybe a little bit of interest, his journeys in the North American Soccer League in the late 70s and early 80s with the Washington Diplomats and the Los Angeles Aztecs. And of course, if you're into football, there's probably no better book, especially if you find yourself really interested in the sort of deep and rich history of the NFL, with the book called NFL Football, A History of America's New National Pastime. It is written by Richard Crepeau and narrated by Marlon May. That, too, is an audiobook that you could choose from over, like I said, 180,000 titles. There's got to be something in there that's going to be of interest to you. And by all means, give it a try. And we appreciate your doing so at audibletrial.com/goodseats. And again, you're going to get your free audiobook download. You can cancel it anytime. And again, even if you cancel it, you can keep that book as long as your device exists. So again, we appreciate it. Give it a try. audibletrial.com/goodseats. And now back to our conversation. Let's also talk about the Nets, right? Because the Nets are their own sort of interesting, crazy storyline, and arguably still crazy in some respects, given, you know, their now tenancy in Brooklyn. But you were, so in MCA, the Nets were still very much in the American Basketball Association, right? So this was still Long Island, right, in the Nassau Coliseum. But so give me a sense of sort of the ABA in your mind's eye.
The ABA was like family. We played Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the most part. There was no one in the Coliseum to see the great Julius Erving. When I was there, the Nets won 2 out of 3 ABA championships. The last year of the ABA championship. The last year of the ABA, and we went into the NBA, and we didn't have any money at all. Roy Bowe was had both teams and was jockeying back and forth. I know with the Islanders in the last year, we kept changing hotels all the time. I think they had trouble paying their bills, but it was a great joy. It was like family, and the ABA had been told, you know, like some horrible parents do to their kids, that you're fat, you're lazy, you're stupid. And you get told enough, you start to believe it. And the ABA never believed how great they were. The players, the minute that the league ended and the 4 teams went into the NBA, the players all were all-stars, phenomenal players. The coaches were phenomenal. Kevin Lockery and Hubie Brown and Al Bianchi and Larry Brown. I mean, it was a great league. It didn't know it because it had been told by the NBA that it sucked. But it didn't. And the proof was in the pudding when the ABA merged with the NBA. And as far as the Islanders are concerned, it was a success. Every year I was there, they made at least the semis. And then I had to choose between the two. But I'll tell you a cute story. My final year with the Islanders, we finally finished first in the East, beating Philadelphia. And we had a tremendous party in Boston, which is the site of the final regular season game. And the party went on. And when it was closing time, and the cops came in, they closed the door, and they partied. And I went over to Bill Torrey, the late Bill Torrey, terrific guy. And I said to him, "Hey, Bill," I said, what chance does this party have of being paid? And he said, "Oh, about 50-50." So and they were terrific days. It was very different. Broadcasters were much closer to the team and the players than they are now. They're being held off, by whatever. And but then you were really part of it, and it was great fun. And so those are some of my experiences.
Well, when you calling those games for those gutty, gritty New Jersey Nets, I remember the dulcet tones of you calling those games with Mike DiTommaso vividly. So, were you certain during those ABA days, or how confident did you feel that this would be one of the teams that would make the leap into the NBA? And then, how about the whole New Jersey sort of thing? Because that, the old Rutgers Athletic Center and the new arena and all that kind of stuff, it seems like there was still a lot of uncertainty, even they were able to make the jump into the NBA, sans one Julius Erving.
Well, you certainly hit the old proverbial nail on the proverbial head. I don't personally, as a human being, I'm very optimistic. I am really Oscar Hammerstein's cockeyed optimist. So I never really worried about the future. Give me the games this year, and then we'll see what happens. I thought that the Nets would go in. And but they ruined themselves. It was a $3 million price to get into the NBA, and Roy Bowe didn't have it, and he sold Julius Erving and got the money. But then Tiny Archibald had come over in a deal in the offseason. Brian Taylor left and John Williamson left and all, and Tiny then tore his Achilles. So now they're without Dr. J and Tiny Archibald. And, they had an awful team. And we played 1 year in the Coliseum, and then we went to Jersey to the rack, as you say, waiting to get into the new building, and we never made it. And I forget where we are here. See, I was moving along. I had 1 year that I loved beyond any others at Enterprise. We had like 100 young guys and gals, and we just they tried to do too much. They did 2 5-minute sportscasts. It was going to take a 5-minute sportscast from Enterprise, and but we had the talk. The talk thing went okay. Anyway, they didn't have any money either. And they ran out of money by the summer. We began January 1st.
and for those following along at home, this is the white hot comet that was for maybe 10 months, the Enterprise Radio Network, which maybe you want to explain. Actually, it does have a little bit of a tie-in to the original ESPN, right? Because this was
sure does.
Rasmussen and friends, right, who arguably helped start the sports radio kind of genre that we know today, really.
Yeah, they helped start ESPN, the Rasmussens, and then they went to the satellite-based network in Avon, Connecticut. We had beautiful studios, beautiful everything, but they just ran out of money, and so we kidded and called it, it was Enterprise Radio, the sports network, so we made it Enterprise Radio, the Broke Network.
Let's talk about sports. Sports of yesterday, now, and days to come. All sorts of sports for all kinds of listeners. Enterprise Radio, the sports network, has plenty of talk 91 hours a week with well-known hosts and celebrity guests. You can converse about this and that by simply calling an 800 toll-free number. Get your share of sports talk.
If you want to know about, I'm going to give you this story only to emphasize how Dom Fortune figures into all this. A guy named Bob Wussler became president of CBS in the 70s. And sooner or later, all presidents get fired. And so he got fired. And he landed a great job. Ted Turner was just beginning with all of his networks in Atlanta, and he needed a pro, and he hired Bob Wussler. And Bob Wussler decided to bring in people. And he brought in Kevin Lockery to coach the basketball team. He brought in Joe Torre to manage the baseball team. And my best friend, my best, he's passed away, Mike Faraday, landed the job as general manager of WSB AM and FM, a sleeping giant, 50,000 watts clear channel. And so when Enterprise went down, Faraday wanted me to come down and do a sports talk show. But I wasn't going to go without play-by-play. And so Wussler got involved, and he made Ted Turner take me to do basketball. You know, second man to Skip Carey. And that's why I went to Atlanta. And then I'm doing most of the Hawk games. And then next year, Skip just quit the Hawks to stay with the Braves. He had a young kid. And so I'm now doing the Hawks and the Braves. I leave my talk show at SB, and I carry that up to the Yankees. So can you imagine?
That's very interesting. So give me a sense, though, of before we get into, I guess we'll sort of round third base here and get to the Yankees story. But how do you, so of the sports that you're doing, and you're doing everything, right? It seems like you're doing talk and you're doing lead-ins, you're doing play-by-play. I suspect you're doing a little even analysis, depending on if you're running the show solo. I mean, you're basically a jack of all trades when it comes to broadcasting games, etc. Is there any sport or team that you liked doing more than others, or like when did you know that baseball would be your sort of ultimate, a future capstone, or did you not care what game and what team and what league you were sort of doing your thing in?
Oh no, I wanted to do baseball. I had done a few games, but only a few. And when I got the Atlanta job the next year, everyone said you're going to be doing the Braves, and I didn't count on it until it happened. But it happened in '83, and I'd always wanted to do baseball. I mean, that's quote unquote the big radio sport, and so when I finally got it, I was in seventh heaven. But if you say to me, which did you like better? I like them all. I don't have that problem. I really don't have that problem. In basketball then, it's different now. In basketball then, you were doing radio. You were right next to the bench. I was part of the team. And Mike Fratello was so great to me. He said, he'd tell people, oh, John's like one of the staff. Because you're traveling together. You're sitting together. You could hear everything going on. You heard all the stuff going on, the stuff. And now they take radio and they put it up in the balcony, and they're not even part of the game. But then you were very much part of it. So, you can't do everything. So I was doing, when I got to Atlanta, then I was doing baseball and basketball. And I should knock on wood here, I've had unusually good health. I haven't missed a game in 38 years. And in Atlanta, there were 5 years, and I was doing about 220 games a year between baseball and basketball. Now, I haven't missed a game with the Yanks in the 30 years, so I've been very fortunate. But it isn't like I like one or the other. When you're doing the game, you're doing the game. This year, they gave me they tossed a little rose my way, and I did a Nets game on TV, and it was like I had done it. I hadn't stopped, because that's part of me. It's inside of me. And
how about Islanders?
It was
chance to do an Islanders game at some point.
I haven't done an Islanders game, but anyway, I'm just saying it was very easy for me, and it was a lot of fun. And once the game begins, boy, I do it. I may not like the packing and unpacking. I may not like, with the Yankees, we don't get getaway day games. So we get into cities at 4 a.m. and you're whipped, and it screws up your system. But as far as the game is concerned, once the game starts, once I start talking, I love it. And I have a partner in Susan Waldman who loves it as much as I do. She just pours everything into it. And, we have a very nice family with Jack Maldonado, our producer engineer, and Rick Roush, who does all the backup for us. And so, I'm very fortunate.
Is there any sport that you haven't done that you wish you might have wanted to try, or that you also think you could have done well in, especially given the 70s and the 80s, right? Which certainly the 70s was almost a wellspring of challenger leagues and hell, there doesn't seem to be any shortage of folks who want to create new sports or new leagues. But is there anything that eluded you that you might wanted to have done or tried or been?
No, I don't think so. I played basketball all my life, and then I ripped up a knee, and I really couldn't play anymore. It didn't come back, and so then I went full time into tennis. So I guess I could have broadcast tennis in some way, but that's not a really exciting play-by-play. I think I've chosen the right sports. I have no interest in boxing, no interest in golf, no interest in horse racing. So I couldn't have done those sports because I didn't know them. No interest in soccer. So I believe, I told Michael Kay, my buddy Michael Kay, on his Center Stage program, that I've had as companions through my life. And I mean, from the time I was, when you start remembering things, 7, 8, I've had sports and music as companions. And I'm involved with sports and music every single day of my life. So I'm, really extremely fortunate. I have this ability. I focus on the things I like, and I totally ignore the things I don't like. So I've been able to combine my avocation and vocation, and it's worked out.
All right, so let's ask maybe one sort of foundational sort of ending question here, maybe, and you can maybe wax nostalgic or prophetic on it. You've obviously spent a lifetime in sports broadcasting and some of the most major and high profile perches out there. How would you describe the profession today through that lens of 40 plus years or so? Maybe.
Oh boy.
Better, worse, things that you maybe wish hadn't changed, and maybe things that have changed for the better. I know it's kind of an open-ended question, but you've got a nice longitudinal viewpoint from some of the, quote unquote, good old days to maybe even today's good old days. I'm really curious to hear.
Well, I think I've mentioned it, and I hope I can put it into some kind of thought that people will latch on to. In the 70s and 80s, I don't know, this is going to be very tough. In the 70s, 60s and 70s, Baltimore, everybody knew everybody. Everyone who did something, all the athletes, all the broadcasters, all the writers, they all were making the same money, but really in the 60s more. And it was like everyone was part of it. You played basketball together, you played golf together, you played tennis together, you were in the same restaurants, etc. Anyway, and the 70s, I think, too, and the 80s, I think the broadcaster was much closer to his teams. But as far as the difference in broadcasting, there's no difference. It's all communicating in your language to your listeners. And so in that way, to me, nothing has changed. If you said to me, John, you've done the Yankees 30 years, you mean nothing has changed? Well, it's changed in that when Torrey, Buck Showalter got very close to Susan and Michael and myself, and it's still that way. And then a real buddy of mine came in to manage the Yankees, Joe Torre. Well, Joe Torre basically took me out to dinner every night on the road for 12 years. So that was different. So that part's different. But as far as broadcasting, broadcasting is broadcasting. It's communicating in the English language to your listeners. I don't think that changes at all.
All right, this will be my last question then, I promise. So I'm wondering too, we're recording this episode the day of the launch of yet another new professional football league, the the Alliance of American Football. The XFL is coming back in a new version next year. And there doesn't seem to be any shortage of new teams coming into established leagues like the Vegas Golden Knights and the new Seattle franchise in the NHL. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about pro sports. And are we, I'm wondering if this is going to continue to grow and get bigger and bigger money and more teams and franchises, or are we maybe getting a little, a little peak, shall we say, at in what maybe the business of sports can deliver to the audiences out there. With television and communications being quite different today, I'm wondering, in your opinion, if we're nearing a peak of pro sports saturation, or maybe we're still got many ways, many years and opportunities to go, given where we've come from.
Well, it has so much to do with television. These new little leagues, they're only because of television. As far as baseball, basketball, football, hockey, they're all here at the big leagues. They're all here to stay. They're going to do nothing but get bigger and better. The crowds are bigger and better. And the football leagues you talk about, I don't think they'll amount to much, but they'll stay as long as there's TV. As a matter of fact, you can say that about the big sports too, the big leagues. They'll only stay there if they retain their ratings. When the ratings stop, it goes off TV. So, but it's so embedded. You know what I've gotten a huge kick out of? One year the Yankees didn't make the playoffs, and I watched the playoff games, all of them on TV. And not only were the places jammed, and the people screaming from the first pitch to the last, but you could actually hear it through TV. And when you can hear a crowd through TV, radio's different. That's all you hear. But I thought it was sensational. And no matter how much it gets knocked, and it does, of course, in the media, it doesn't really matter. The fans love it. They love the idea of being part of it. It brings cities together, and I don't see any problems. Now, if once I'm long gone, 50 years from now, how do I know what's going to happen? But right now, they have no problems. Oh, they write about the problems, but as long as the fans are connected to the franchise. Eddie Einhorn was a great leader in sports television. He's passed on. And he was co-owner of the White Sox with his buddy Jerry Reinsdorf. And Eddie once told me, and he said, he said, the fans own the team. He said, hey, we're just the caretakers. It's the fans' game. And it is. Without fans, they would still play the different sports, but they'd have to lug their equipment, into Central Park and play the ball game. But this way, it's bigger than anyone ever thought it could be. I was just telling Susan that Anthony Davis, when he turned down the New Orleans Pelicans contract, the max contract, you know what the max contract was? It was $48 million a year.
Unbelievable.
For 5 years. I would say unbelievable, yes. And they're not spending it if they're not making it. So they're making it. And, I'm not giving you a very good answer, but sports, the NBA, the NHL, MLB, and the NFL are here to stay. The fans love it. They have a great connection, an emotional connection. And you see it when the stands are jammed. If it's 0 degrees in Kansas City, they're jammed. So, you have to work through problems. There always will be problems of everything in life. But for the foreseeable future, they're only going to get bigger and better.
Well, John, I appreciate this. This is, I certainly appreciate you letting us drag you into some of your earliest stops, whether you care to remember them or not. You think. Oh,
no, I remember. Everyone remembers everything in their lives. Of course, I remember them and like them. I love those WHA games in the Garden before 5,000 people. I love the games at Downing Stadium, which is, a relic. I mean, they shouldn't have played there. So it's all fun. I take it down as all fun.
Yeah, I guess there are tougher ways to make a living, right? And when you're having fun in the zone and you know what you want to do, which you obviously knew at a very early age, it shows. And I think your longevity and the pinnacle, obviously being the Yankees broadcaster for such a long period of time, is proof of that. And look, I thank you for taking a few minutes to kind of let us drag you back into that past and celebrate your current and hopefully longtime future with your current gig with the Yankees. Mazel tov.
Well, I appreciate it. I also hope it's a long time. I have to get my kids through college first, and then we'll see. But anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hope I've done a good job for you. And but I've enjoyed it very much.
All right, our thanks to the one, the only John Sterling, and we wish him a tremendous amount of success in this upcoming season with the New York Yankees, broadcasting, his zillionth season, and the Yankees always seem to be in contention, and it's just not summer without John Sterling calling Yankee games, and you can hear him, of course, in the New York metropolitan area on the Yes Network, and we once again thank Upton Bell for connecting us to the great and legendary John Sterling. We also want to thank our pal Richie Franklin for the clip that you heard there. That was the first touchdown, home touchdown of the New York Stars of the WFL. That clip is courtesy of Richie, and you can find out he's probably the number one World Football League fan that you're going to find out there. He's got a whole host of sites out there, but you can check out all of his amazing collection of stuff at charlottehornetswfl.com. He calls that the Charlotte Hornets Football Network, and of course that's where the New York Stars ultimately went, courtesy of Upton Bell transferring that New York Stars franchise mid-season, hard to believe, down to Charlotte. Again, that's charlottehornetswfl.com. There's also, he's got the worldfootballleague.org website and a bunch of others. And we thank Richie for allowing us to use that clip from his site with his permission. And let's see, that other clip you also heard too, the Enterprise radio clip, that was off of YouTube somewhere. I don't know who recorded it, but that came from a broadcast on September 21st, 1981. And that, again, was the old Enterprise Radio Network. And I think in New York, it was the old WWRL, AM 1600, if I'm not mistaken. I believe where that clip came from. All right, so we want to thank you, of course, for listening. Please, by all means, give us a check out on our social media sites. You can find us at Good Seats Still on Twitter. That's at Good Seats Still. You'll find us on Instagram at Good Seats Still Available. You will find us at on Facebook. We've got a page devoted to us there. By all means, check us out. And of course, on our website, goodseatsstillavailable.com. That's the locus for everything related to the show. You search up this episode with John Sterling, or the 100 plus episodes now of other stuff and other people that we've talked to, and plenty more to come. You want to send us an email? Go ahead. You can click off the website there, or you can send it to us directly at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. Of course, you go to the website, you can sign up for our email newsletter. You'll find us there for our little weekly tidbits on what's up and coming up your way. And what else? Oh, let's thank our friend Jerry Payne, the good doctor at Podfly Productions. He, of course, our producer and editor extraordinaire. And you can find out more about Podfly and their services at podfly.net. All right. Thank you tremendously for listening. Until then, we wish you a fond adieu, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much for listening. You can't appreciate it enough. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
WMCA. Now, like it or not, you'll be learning who's good with a bat but can't throw, and similar junk he must keep in a trunk for the John Sterling Show. And once he adopts a position, he won't vacillate to and fro, no matter how wrong he may be all along. on the John Sterling Show.
Give it a rest.
Yes, the John Sterling Show.
Yeah.